Hello everyone, today is March the 3rd, 2018. I want to share a couple of links with you talking about the press. This is a quote, "We are intellectual prostitutes," end quote. One night, probably in 1880, John Swinton, then the preeminent New York journalist, was the guest of honor at a banquet given him by the leaders of his craft. Someone who knew neither the press nor Swinton offered a toast to the independent press. Swinton outraged his colleagues by replying, "There is no such thing at this date of the world's history in America as an independent press. You know it, and I know it. There is not one of you who dares to write your honest opinions, and if you did, you know beforehand that it would never appear in print. I am paid weekly for keeping my honest opinions out of the paper I am connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you who would be so foolish as to write honest opinions would be thrown out on the streets looking for another job. If I allowed my honest opinions to appear in one issue of my paper, before 24 hours my occupation would be gone. The business of journalists is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And what folly is this toasting an independent press? We are the tools and vessels of rich men behind the scenes. We are jumping jacks. They pull the strings, and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes." Folks, 90% of American media is controlled by 6 corporations. The conglomerates are General Electric, News Corporation, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. It is worth repeating again and again that the bulk of America's mainline media is owned and controlled by a mere 6 corporations. This, of course, means that unless you're already consciously avoiding these mainline media sources, then most of the news and entertainment that makes it onto your screen and into your mind comes from a small pool of corporate sources, all of which play important roles in delivering propaganda, social programming, and perpetual crisis narratives to the public. The conglomerates are General Electric, News Corporation, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. All the corporations that have their own shady histories, dealings, and suspicious actors. Disney being widely regarded as an occult enterprise aimed at warping the minds of children with disturbing subliminal imagery. One of these companies is also the 12th largest U.S. military defense contractor, so it is no surprise that so much of our entertainment centers around the glorification of war and violence. By surveying what is available for consumption in the mass media, it is easy to see what types of society these 6 corporations are helping to construct. They have the power to warp reality by calling staged shows reality shows, ideas which don't support mainstream narratives and the consumer agenda are omitted, and stories about independent people overcoming strife without dependence on government are seldom, if ever, elevated. The promotion of shallow, materialistic, egocentric values and the obvious dumbing down of the American population is coming from these 6 corporations. Think about that. These are the companies that glorify consumption, obedience, ignorance, and hypersexualization of youth, the glorification of war and government surveillance, and so on. The advertisers that support these media companies have tremendous sway over what makes it on the airways. They help to control public perception. The bottom line is that corporate media is I can't pronounce this name, behemoth of special interests and mind controllers. So much of the human story is omitted in this capitalistic, for-profit, environment scheme like this, which is why, now more than ever, the independent alternative media is such a gem for humankind. The infographic below was produced in 2011 by frugaldad.com, and although there have been some changes to the information since then, the landscape of American media is well represented here. Compare today to 1983 when the industry was occupied by some 50 independent media companies. Some changes to the graphic noted by Business Insider. Note the infographic is from last year and is missing some key transactions. GE does not own NBC or Comcast or any media anymore, so that sixth company is now Comcast, and Time Warner doesn't own AOL, so Huffington Post isn't affiliated with them. With such tremendous global research in all forms of media communication, these corporations help to shape our world by providing coverage of our lives, analysis of our world, entertainment to pass our time and inspire our minds, and even distraction and occupation for our children. The six companies are General Electric, Notable Properties, Comcast, NBC, Universal Pictures, Focus Features, News Corp, Notable Properties, Fox, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Disney, Notable Properties, ABC, ESPN, Pixar, Miramax, Marvel Studios, Viacom, Notable Properties, MTV, Nick Jr., BET, CMT, Paramount Pictures, Time Warner, Notable Properties, CNN, HBO, Time, Warner Brothers, CBS, Notable Properties, Showtime, Smithsonian Channel, NFL.com, Jeopardy, 60 Minutes. 232 media executives control the information diet of 277 million Americans. The total 2010 revenue for the Big Six was $275.9 billion. Television. The Big Six control 70% of your cable. Comcast NBC merger guarantee control 1 of every 5 hours of television. 178 million unique users read Time Warner News every month. News Corp owns the top newspapers on 3 continents. In 2010, they avoided $875 million in U.S. taxes, enough to double FEMA's budget, or fund NPR for 40 years. Well, NPR is controlled too. Here's an example of the scripted news media. They're all saying the same things.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some of the spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take the spring out of the step of the Easter Bunny.
Talk show host Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be able to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on his late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night TV.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope once again on late-night TV.
Conan O'Brien may be be about to push the envelope on late night television?
Conan O'Brien is looking to push the envelope on late night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late night TV.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late night television.
Conan O'Brien may be preparing to push the late night envelope.
And welcome back to the show. I scream, you scream. You know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream.
Well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream. Well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, we all know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream. Well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream. We all know the rest of it, right? I scream, you scream. Well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, and you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
Well, I scream, you scream, well, I think...
There you have it. Every single thing that's coming out of these mainstream medias is scripted. It's the same thing. It's controlled by 6 corporations. You think you're getting the real news? You're not. Have a nice day.